The Trump administration's 25% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican goods took effect as of Tuesday as planned, along with 20% against Chinese imports. Beijing responded with retaliatory levies on some American products, signaling the start of a trade war. Korea's industrial output in January fell to a level unseen in nearly 5 years since the COVID-19 outbreak, while retail sales and facility investments also lost ground from a month ago, sounding alarms about the overall economy. The U.S. has reportedly paused its military aid to Ukraine following last week's extraordinary spat between Presidents Trump and Zelensky at the Oval Office, as Washington ups its pressure on the war-torn nation. It's March 4th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with the looming trade war as the U.S. fresh tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports entering the American market took effect on Tuesday, as did additional levies against China. An Sung-jin reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump's imposition of 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico went into effect on March 4th local time. Likewise, tariffs on China were doubled to 20% on the same day. However, these countries issued immediate responses. China's Ministry of Commerce was quick to respond, issuing a statement that said Beijing will take retaliatory measures, with import taxes of 10 to 15% on some U.S. goods, including American beef, pork, dairy, and agricultural products starting from March 10th. The statement also said that imposing tariffs is a typical act of unilateralism and bullying. China also vowed to impose export control sanctions on some American companies for strategic items. Canada has also retaliated by immediately imposing 25% tariffs on 30 billion Canadian dollars or 20 billion US dollars worth of US imports, adding that more will be levied on another 86 billion US dollars worth of goods within the next 21 days. In a written statement, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said these tariffs will continue until US trade measures are withdrawn. These corresponding measures come as Trump again cited drug trafficking as a major reason for the import taxes.
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set.
Trump on his social media further announced that the U.S. will be levying tariffs on crop purchases as well, starting from April 2nd. Fruit, vegetable, and nut imports have been climbing, leading to an agriculture trade deficit in the U.S. As Trump continues to slap tariffs, the U.S. economy has been startled. U.S. stocks plunged on Monday with the Nasdaq dropping by around 3% and the Dow Jones losing nearly 2%. Pundits say as investment confidence has fallen following the tariff impositions, there are growing concerns for the U.S. market, especially regarding inflation.
I think the tariff scenario is definitively an inflationary aspect to what can happen within the economy and the market. Right now, what I'm seeing and hearing is a little bit of a stagflation concern.
The tariffs are raising concerns that tit-for-tat levies could eventually lead to a global trade war. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The Korean trade authorities say a communication channel is ready with the U.S. to discuss tariffs, while the two sides seek to strengthen their cooperation on shipbuilding and energy. Moon Hye-ryum tells us more.
South Korea's Trade Minister An Duk-gun says his recent visit to the United States has established a key communication channel with the Trump administration to discuss tariffs and industrial cooperation, including shipbuilding and energy. Speaking at a press briefing on Tuesday, An described this as a major achievement, allowing negotiations to take place in a way that best serves South Korea's interests. He likened the tariff talks to a marathon, warning that new tariffs on industries such as semiconductors, biomanufacturing, and automobiles could emerge at any time. During his visit, An met with senior U.S. officials, including Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and White House Energy Advisor Doug Burgum. He confirmed that 4 working-level dialogue groups have been established on shipbuilding, energy, Alaska gas development, and non-tariff barriers, alongside separate channels with the U.S. Commerce Department, the U.S. Trade Representative, and the National Energy Council. With the U.S. set to expand tariffs on steel and aluminium starting next week and poised to introduce more, and stressed that securing a fair competitive environment is crucial, saying South Korean firms will be able to adapt if they are not placed at a disadvantage compared to other countries. He also emphasized the need for consistent policy, highlighting the strong industrial ties between the two countries, and stated that Seoul is urging Washington to uphold commitments made to Korean companies under the previous administration, such as the Inflation Reduction Act. On shipbuilding, An said Washington views South Korea as a key partner in strengthening U.S. naval capabilities, with Commerce Secretary Lutnick expressing appreciation for Seoul's willingness to cooperate. An further revealed that he had explored opportunities for South Korean participation in Alaska's gas development project, which has become a priority under President Trump's push for increased domestic oil and gas production. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Korea's industrial output, facility investment, and retail sales all fell in January amid growing concerns stemming from U.S. tariffs. Park Go-nu has the numbers.
South Korea's production, investment, and consumption all dropped in January, according to data from Statistics Korea on Tuesday, marking the first decline in 2 months.
That was mainly due to the base effect from relatively strong growth the previous month and fewer working days due to the long Lunar New Year holiday.
Overall industrial output in January decreased by 2.7% on month. That's the largest drop in nearly 5 years, since early 2020 when the number of COVID-19 cases started to surge. The mining and manufacturing sector fell by over 2%, despite a slight increase in chip production. In investment, facility investment plunged more than 14% on month, the biggest drop in over 4 years, driven by declines in machinery and transport equipment. Construction and civil engineering project results also fell, contributing to the overall drop in investment. Consumption also decreased in January by 0.6% compared to the previous month, with drops seen in items such as cosmetics. One expert said it'll be difficult to see any positive signs across the board throughout the year, especially regarding the tariff war.
The exports will decline dramatically. Korean companies are exporting goods produced in China to the United States. That will be devastating. And another one is many Korean companies have established factories in Mexico.
Amid these challenges, the Finance Ministry has vowed to strengthen efforts to support the recovery of people's livelihoods and boost exports through funding. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
South Korea's first alternative stock trading platform, Nextrade, was launched Tuesday morning. It runs for 12 hours from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., longer than the trading hours of the main Korea exchange bourse. It also has lower commission fees compared to the main bourse. It started with 10 firms being traded, but the number is expected to rise to 800 over the next month. U.S. President Donald Trump continues upping his pressure on Ukraine following last week's unprecedented public spat with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He now pauses military aid to the beleaguered country. For more on what the break could mean, we now turn to our correspondent Kim Jong-sil, joining us here in the studio. Jong-sil, first walk us through the latest on President Trump's decision to halt the aid. How did this decision come about?
Jong-min, President Trump's decision to pause military assistance to Ukraine is raising significant concerns, not just in Ukraine, but also in Europe. The suspension reportedly affects over $1 billion in arms and ammunition, which Kyiv heavily relies on to defend itself against Russia's ongoing attacks. This pause in U.S. military support comes at a critical time. Ukrainian forces are still locked in a battle with Russian troops, and without those supplies, their ability to continue resisting could be severely compromised. Now, this move from Trump follows a particularly tense meeting at the White House on Friday between the U.S. and the Ukrainian leaders. Let's take a look at how it unfolded.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's
with
back
all
to
respect to
you.
you.
Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today,
have you said thank you?
even
Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Now, this exchange clearly set the stage for Trump's subsequent announcement. Zelensky, after his visit to Washington, headed to London, where he made his comment that reportedly upset officials in the U.S.
An agreement to end the war is still very, very far away, and no one has started all these steps yet.
But he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal, and if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. 1 hour away from which
Trump has been vocal about wanting to see an end to the war quickly and suggested that Zelensky's resistance to peace talks could jeopardize his position. Experts warn that without U.S. support, Ukraine could lose access to advanced weaponry, which would significantly impact its defense capabilities.
How has Europe reacted to this?
Chongmin, several leaders in Europe, especially from France and Britain, have expressed support since Friday's fallout. Take a listen.
A staggering scene unfolded before the lenses of the entire world, marked by brutality, a desire to humiliate, with the goal of making Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky fold through threats so that he gives in to the demands of his aggressors.
As you heard from the cheers on the street outside, you have full backing across the United Kingdom, and we stand with you, with Ukraine, for as long as it may take.
While European leaders continue to show strong support for Ukraine, experts are concerned that this rift between the U.S. and Ukraine could signal a significant break between the U.S. and its European allies. Former U.S. intelligence officer Angela Stent warned that such a divide could mark the beginning of a U.S. exit from Europe.
Clearly, we've had a major U.S.-European break on all of this, something that I think the Russians in their wildest hopes wouldn't have dreamt of before.
Meanwhile, Russia is closely monitoring this divide, with the state media covering this development. Experts, including several experts, are warning that Russia could exploit this diplomatic fallout to make further territorial gains in Ukraine, especially as peace talks remained stalled.
Russia will likely seek to solidify control over territories like Donbas, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, aiming to firmly establish them as part of its own.
Experts argue that if the war ends this way, Russia could potentially gain additional territory without losing any of its own.
Of course, we'll be following this story. Thank you, Jung Shi, for the report.
Thank you.
In China, the country's biggest annual political event kicked off on Tuesday against the backdrop of heightened trade tensions with the U.S. The two sessions, which refers to annual meetings of the two key Chinese institutions, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the National People's Congress, are closely observed by the outside world as they offer a clue to the policy agenda for the world's second-largest economy. Much of this year's discussion that'll take place until next Tuesday is expected to be focused on countermeasures against Trump's tariff war and harnessing the power of artificial intelligence. Over in Spain, the world's largest mobile device showcase has opened its doors, with, of course, AI taking center stage. Our correspondent Yi Sujin files this report from Barcelona.
Thousands have once again made the annual pilgrimage to Barcelona for the latest innovations in mobile devices and telecommunications. And at the 2025 Mobile World Congress, one theme dominates: artificial intelligence.
It's basically every booth that you are crossing is the one about AI integration. So it's all about AI mostly.
One such booth where AI is taking center stage is South Korean telecom giant LG U+'s first ever solo exhibition at MWC, where visitors are greeted not just by staff, but by the humanoid robot Alice.
I'm Alice, a humanoid robot, and I'm here to help you at MWC 2025. What would you like to know or experience?
Alice, can I take a photo with you? But it's not just about eye-catching AI technology, as LG U+ is showcasing AI innovations that are secure.
As AI develops, so there are more crimes related to AI, such as so the criminals use the AI-generated voices. Basically, there are many generated AI's defects, such as personal information leakages.
LG U+'s AI-powered technology, anti-deep voice, is designed to detect voice phishing and fraud by distinguishing between real human voices and deepfake voices.
We will send you the final version of the proposal.
After my voice was recorded, it was turned into a deepfake to test the technology.
This is the investigation team. Your identity is being reviewed for financial fraud.
The AI technology successfully detected that my voice was a deepfake. The focus on secure AI is also evident in the mobile industry, particularly in Samsung Electronics' latest mid-range smartphones, unveiled for the first time at this year's convention.
That the Galaxy AI is providing you this new way of interacting with the device, also in a secure way. So the user have to be trusted that his information is never going to be compromised.
And the more budget-friendly prices are set to make secure and advanced AI-powered features, such as AI-enhanced photography, once limited to high-end models, more accessible. AI-enhanced photography features were also what drew large crowds to Chinese smartphones. Huawei showcased the world's first commercial trifold smartphone, utilizing AI to enhance zoom capabilities for photography, while Xiaomi debuted its 15 Ultra, featuring AI-driven extreme zoom and image clarity enhancements for photos. From AI-driven security solutions to AI-powered smartphones, this year's MWC is making one thing clear: artificial intelligence is no longer an option but a necessity for mobile and telecom innovation. Isujin, Arirang News, Barcelona.
South Korea's intelligence agency has warned of hacking attacks from North Korea, saying increasingly sophisticated techniques are being used to steal classified information and key technologies from government agencies and tech companies. The National Intelligence Service said Tuesday that North Korean hacking groups have been focusing on software supply chain attacks, using methods such as hacking IT service providers to bypass security, exploiting software vulnerabilities, and targeting security system weaknesses. The agency is now urging companies and institutions to apply software security patches and block internet access for administrator accounts. It also says it's important to create a checklist of basic security protocols and enhance employee security awareness through training. In other news, a special tour program took place this past weekend, offering a rare glimpse of civilians across the inter-Korean border and more. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has more.
Hundreds of people have gathered at Seoul Station to visit strictly controlled tourist spots near the demilitarized zone. They are on Group DMZ Peace Train tours offered by national railroad operator Korail's subsidiary Korail Tourism Development, headed by Kwon Baek-shin. Gyeonggi-do Province and the cities of Gimpo and Paju, marking the 80th anniversary of the country's liberation. This limited one-day trip provides 3 courses and one is visiting Gimpo. Going on a train itself gave them the journey's excitement, but scheduled events spice things up.
In Gimpo, a coastal barbed wire trail runs along the Hangang River, offering a unique experience of walking along the DMZ border. Also, visitors can experience local culture by trying coffee grounds using a Korean traditional millstone, setting it apart from other places.
There were guides leading everyone so we could travel comfortably on schedule. We could also wear military uniforms on the train, and there were many other enjoyable activities.
The preset itinerary offers a lot, but the most notable is a visit to the Aegibong Peace Eco Park in Gimpo City. At Jogang Observatory, people can see North Korea's border county of Gaepung, just 1.4 kilometers across the Imjingang River. Within this restricted military zone lies a branch of the iconic capitalist coffee brand Starbucks, which operates under strict security protocols. It has already attracted many visitors eager to get a rare glimpse of North Korean civilian villages. Coffee in hand, visitors can take a look at the villages, with some lucky enough to find North Koreans plowing and doing laundry in the spring. That is, however, not the only feature of Aegibong Park.
Although it is located within the civilian control line, it opens at night once a month. About 10 years ago, there was a steel tower where a Christmas light ceremony was held every year. This no longer exists, but instead, we offer a unique trail that looks like a Christmas tree as a whole.
An opportunity to witness the traces of a divided nation's history and have a peek at North Korea from up close. The DMZ Peace Train program will continue this year, starting in mid-April. 김보경, Arirang News, Gimpo.
Rain turned into snow today in areas with low temperatures. As the heavy snow advisories and warnings were extended further, heavy snow advisories were also issued in the eastern and southern parts of Seoul. Up to 40 centimeters or more has been falling in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, and up to 30 centimeters in the northeastern mountainous areas of Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Snow across the country will mostly stop tonight. From tomorrow, which is Gyeongchip on the traditional calendar, the cold will fall back and the normal temperatures for this time of year will make a return. However, rain and snow will continue until tomorrow on the East Coast and Jeju Island. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Daejeon will start off at 0 degrees Celsius, Jeju at 7 degrees. Daily highs will move up to around 10 degrees in Daejeon, Gwangju, Busan, and Jeju. Temperatures will increase from tomorrow and stay in double digits throughout the week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. Barbecue restaurants. Step 1. Taking care of your clothes. Put your jacket in the plastic bag. Seal it tight. If the stool flips open, store your clothes inside. Wearing light colors? Grab an apron. It's the best defense against oil splatter and smoke. Step 2. Bottomless side dishes. Basic side dishes at a barbecue restaurant. Eat, and eat as much as you want. Side dishes come with free refills. Oh, and if you don't see this sign, just ask, 사장님, 여기 밑반찬 좀 더 주세요. Simple, isn't it? Step 3. Grilling meat. There are various kinds of samgyeopsal in Korea. Place the meat on the grill. Turn it over when golden. And again when it looks done. Again and again and again. Step 4. Sam style. You aren't taking bites of sun like a taco, are you? In Korea, we have it in one bite. A pro tip here. Add only as much as you can handle in a bite. Gotta avoid awkward situations. Step 5. Enjoy the perks. After the meal, enjoy the perks offered as a Korean restaurant. Fabric refreshers get rid of the barbecue smell, while mint candies freshen your breath. Did you survive the barbecue restaurant? Hang on. Are you here with someone you want to impress? Then let's skip the garlic. Who knows what will happen?
The single letter that has captivated the world. K. We answered that question with a K-culture journalist on The Culture Wave. What's the next K on your radar? Get ready to ride the wave of K-culture's latest trends.
네, 인사드리겠습니다. 휴스턴, 에이던. 안녕하세요, 에이던입니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. The U.S. Ukraine summit ended without progress, derailing what was seen as a crucial step toward a ceasefire. The collapse of the U.S. Ukraine mineral agreement has not only stalled negotiations, but has also deepened tensions between Washington and Kyiv. President Trump reportedly ordered a complete halt to U.S. military aid temporarily, fueling concerns that the war may become even more protracted. European leaders, meanwhile, are attempting to fill the diplomatic void, proposing a peace framework that includes a one-month ceasefire on all fronts except the ground war. However, questions remain about whether the U.S. will accept this proposal and how Moscow will react to it. To help us analyze these pressing issues, we invite Malcolm Davis, senior analyst at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And also joining us online is Hannah Kim, assistant professor at Sogang University GSIS. Great to have you again, Professor Kim.
Thanks for having me again.
So, Professor Kim, let's start with you. On February 28th, the summit between the U.S. and Ukrainian presidents ended in failure, and the U.S.-Ukraine mineral agreement, which was considered, the first step, a crucial step towards a ceasefire, has now returned to square one. What was the decisive reason for this breakdown in talks between the two leaders?
Right. So when we think about this breakdown, even before this breakdown even began, the summit between President Trump and President Zelensky went on for about 2 hours and 22 minutes. And during that time, there were a lot of discussions and comments related to dress code and showing gratitude, and even comments related to World War III. So there was already a lot of tension throughout this entire time. But the decisive reason for this breakdown was due to the heated exchange between the two leaders over the proposed U.S.-Ukraine mineral resource deal. And so they were negotiating an agreement, the United States and Ukraine, concerning the mineral resources, and key aspects of this included revenue sharing, investment funds, and security assurances. But the conflict appeared when the U.S. sought substantial economic concessions from Ukraine. The U.S. proposed that they would receive 50% of Ukraine's revenues from natural resources and wanted this as compensation for past military aid. But the proposed agreement lacked clear security guarantees for Ukraine. And President Zelensky sought explicit U.S. security guarantees as part of the agreement, which was not originally part of the draft. And so President Trump declined to offer such guarantees. And because this would put Ukraine in an unstable situation, President Zelensky also started to reject the terms. So this breakdown of the event really highlights the complexities of the relationship between economic cooperation and security during a very tense geopolitical climate.
Right, so it certainly seems to raise the stakes for what comes next now. Now let's bring in Dr. Davis to the conversation. So following this meeting, President Zelensky has been working to manage the situation through media interviews. Now, meanwhile, the Trump administration has ramped up pressure, even bringing up the possibility of a regime change in Ukraine. Dr. Davis, how likely is it that discussions between the two countries will make any meaningful progress going forward?
Well, right at the moment, it's pretty unlikely in the sense that certainly President Zelensky of Ukraine was ambushed at the White House meeting in many respects. I think he had quite legitimate concerns about the absence of security guarantees associated with that minerals agreement, where essentially the U.S. would make a resources grab for a substantial portion of Ukraine's rare earths, but give nothing in return in terms of a security agreement. And I think that's why President Zelensky started to challenge both President Trump and Vice President Vance in that regard, and that touched off that explosion of anger on the part of the U.S. side. And right now we have a situation where Zelensky basically feels that the U.S. has walked away, has aligned with Putin and Russia, and now has even cut off military assistance. So right at the moment, I'm not seeing much evidence of any move by either side towards a reconciliation that could lead to negotiations resuming.
Right, so probably not in the near future, though. So in response to this failed U.S. Ukraine summit, world leaders held an emergency meeting on the 2nd to discuss follow-up measures, and they announced plans to propose a peace negotiation framework to the U.S., including a one-month ceasefire on all fronts except the Grand War. We're talking about EU states. Professor Kim, do you think the U.S. will accept this kind of proposal?
So in line with what Dr. Davis was saying, I don't think that it's very likely that the U.S. will be accepting this proposal. You know, even though European leaders have rallied behind President Zelensky in Ukraine, the U.S. doesn't really seem to be doing this at the moment. President Trump is more likely to initiate direct talks with Moscow and has shown willingness to do so, but instead bypass European countries. In many ways, this shows that he wants to control the negotiation process rather than follow a European-led framework. The Trump administration has also shown skepticism regarding the European ceasefire proposals because the proposal is a one-month ceasefire on all fronts except ground war, meaning that the frontline battles will continue, and the U.S. may view this as an ineffective solution since it doesn't completely halt hostilities. And in many ways, the U.S. wants to focus on a deal that aligns more with its own self-interests, and Trump has continuously emphasized that any ceasefire or peace deal should go through the U.S. and Ukraine rather than Europe. And most importantly now, the U.S. is prioritizing economic arrangements over ceasefire agreements. The Biden administration provided large financial packages with very few strings attached, but now the Trump administration wants to focus on economic returns. And the failed U.S.-Ukraine summit really just highlights this.
Right, so more solid, concrete returns, that's what the U.S. wants now. So with this developments, concerns are growing more over a prolonged war in Ukraine following the collapse of the summit. And adding to the concern, President Trump reportedly ordered a temporary halt to U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Dr. Davis, how do you assess the future trajectory of the Russia-Ukraine war?
Well, look, I think the so-called temporary pause is really concerning because it depends on how long this pause lasts will determine whether Ukraine has the ability to resist Russian military operations in the coming fall and the coming spring and summer in Ukraine. I think that the longer this pause lasts, the faster the Ukrainians will go through their remaining stockpiles of munitions and weapons. And then in the end, they have to basically choose to withdraw from key locations or be overrun. And that's when you're going to start to see the Russians starting to make significant territorial gains in areas around Pokrovsk, near Kharkiv, and potentially in the south towards Kherson and ultimately aiming towards Odessa. So I think that, you know, there is a real danger here that if this pause in U.S. military assistance carries on for weeks, particularly if it carries on for months, then Russia could gain a decisive advantage and be in a very strong position then to dictate a much more aggressive and determined posture in any future peace negotiations that would go beyond what it even is claiming for now. So this is a very dangerous development indeed.
Right, it's a very concerning situation. So, but on the other hand, some speculate that the failure of the talks could shift the balance of power in the peace negotiations in Russia's favor, like Dr. Davis has just mentioned. Professor Kim, could the Trump administration push harder for a peace deal that aligns more with Russia's interests, such as blocking Ukraine's NATO membership and preventing territorial recovery?
Yeah, it seems like the Trump administration will be pushing for a deal that aligns more with Russia, at least relative to previous administrations. As you mentioned, one example of this has to do with blocking Ukraine's NATO membership. U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth stated that Ukraine will not be a NATO member and called it unrealistic, which aligns with Russia's consistent opposition to Ukraine joining NATO. Another example has to do with preventing territorial recovery. The U.S. administration has proposed a peace deal that would cede significant territory to Russia, which again works in Russia's favor. And in addition to this, the Trump administration working relatively closely with Putin really shows that this is weakening the West's negotiation process. And even domestically, there has been a lot of backlash related to this. And so, this is under the justification that this would swiftly resolve the conflict, but there are many things that are being done that does work in Russia's favor.
Right. So staying with this context, as President Trump focuses on improving relations with President Putin, the idea of strengthening Europe's self-reliant defense is also gaining traction, regardless of whether a peace deal is reached or not. So this stems from concerns that Russia's threat could grow with tacit U.S. approval. How do you view this development, Dr. Davis?
I think the Europeans are now waking up to an awful reality whereby they can no longer count on the United States to support their security in Europe. There's even question marks as to whether the United States will in fact withdraw from NATO or could, at the very minimum, equivocate and refuse to honour its obligations under the Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which says an attack on one is an attack on all. So Europe is now waking up to a new reality where it's facing an aggressive Russia that seems to be poised to win in Ukraine and potentially being offered a peace settlement that gives it everything it wants and also gives it time to regroup and rearm its military so that in a year or two, Putin could decide either to launch another war against Ukraine to take more territory, or he could launch an attack directly against NATO. And if the US is not there, if the US is no longer supporting European security, then Europe stands alone. And this is the challenge that the Europeans are now facing, is how do they re-equip their militaries? How do they build up their military capabilities to be able to deter Russia or defeat Russia if Russia were to attack Europe directly without the United States support?
Right. So this has caused, ripple effects that go beyond Ukraine's security now. And amid ongoing Ukraine peace talks, President Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping have placed emphasis on their close communication, including a recent phone call. What message does this China-Russia dialogue send, Professor Kim?
So this phone call actually took place on February 24th, which marked the third year since Russia invaded Ukraine. So I do think that there is some symbolism there in terms of how close their communication is. And the phone call between China and Russia seemed to send several messages. One, it really did highlight the strength of China-Russia relations. In the phone call, they reaffirmed their no limits partnership, emphasizing that external forces cannot drive a wedge between the two countries. And it also signaled a unified stance against Western influences. So it's highlighting a mutual commitment to counterbalancing the U.S. and NATO. And it also reflected the ongoing strategic coordination in terms of global security issues like the Ukraine conflict, which they both have vested interests in. And so the U.S.-Russia rapprochement may impact China-Russia relations, but I don't think that it will impact it in a very strong way. China is a crucial economic partner for Russia, and the economic interdependence between the two countries is likely to sustain the bilateral relationship. And China will observe the U.S.-Russia rapprochement carefully and cautiously, but a significant rift at this point seems very unlikely.
Well, now Russia continues to strengthen its ties with North Korea as well. We've been seeing that in the past month. On February 27th, President Putin met with Ri Hyong, Secretary of North Korea's Workers' Party. Given that such a meeting was highly unusual, Dr. Davis, analysts suggest that critical issues were discussed. Could you tell us what do you think was on the agenda?
Well, it's very hard to know because everything I've read about this meeting is not very descriptive of what actually was discussed. But I can guess that probably what Putin would be asking the North Koreans for is additional manpower in the form of North Korean soldiers to go fight at the front. The North Koreans have taken terrible losses in the face of Ukrainian defenses. And I think that Putin would want North Korea to supply additional forces, perhaps on a much larger scale than the 11,000 troops that Kim Jong-un sent initially. The other issue that I think Putin would want to raise with North Korea would be the supply of additional short-range ballistic missile capabilities, drone capabilities, and other types of strike capabilities that Russia can then use to attack Ukraine's critical infrastructure, particularly its power grid. Obviously, there's got to be a quid pro quo here. Kim would want something in return, and I think Kim's main interest is in Russian expertise and technology on nuclear weapons, on missile capabilities, and on space launch capabilities and space systems. And I think that Putin probably is quite willing to work with Kim Jong-un and give Kim what he needs in return for essentially manpower to throw into the meat grinder, to put it bluntly. And that's where I think probably this negotiation was focused on.
Right, so North Korea would want, Russia would want more manpower and missile capabilities from the North, and the North would want technologies to develop these missiles, right?
That's correct. The North Koreans want the ability to strengthen and modernize their missile capabilities, but I also think space launch and space surveillance capabilities is high on Pyongyang's list, so that would be a priority.
Now, staying with North Korea, a North Korean soldier captured by Ukrainian forces has reportedly expressed a clear intention to defect, but some speculate that it may be quite difficult for South Korea to bring them in solely through a bilateral deal with Ukraine. What are the possibilities and potential challenges surrounding the repatriation of the North Korean soldier, Dr. Davis?
It's a hard one to answer in the sense that, from what I've read, there are two North Korean soldiers that are expressing an interest in defecting, although some of the statements they're making suggest that they're not totally sold on the idea of coming to South Korea. Certainly, they could not go back to North Korea because the fact that they've been captured would mean that they were sent back to North Korea, repatriated, if you like. They would be executed by the regime. So I think that they've got everything to gain and nothing to lose by coming to the South. But obviously, as with any defection, their ability to be trusted and fit in with South Korean society is something that would be a concern. So I'm sure the South Korean officials are trying to work out how best to handle this particular situation.
Right, so this case would definitely add another layer of complexity to regional diplomacy. Now, the U.S.-Russia peace negotiations are also interconnected with North Korea-Russia, North Korea-U.S., and South Korea-Russia relations as well, potentially causing further turbulence on the Korean peninsula. Professor Kim, before we let you go, how should South Korea strategize its response as Ukraine peace talks unfold?
Right. So as Dr. Davis just mentioned, the relationship between Russia and North Korea is relatively close-knit. And so with this growing relationship between the U.S. and Russia, there are definitely a lot of issues that we're seeing coming up right now. So in terms of progress in U.S.-Russia peace negotiations, it can significantly influence the Korean Peninsula security landscape. So there are several things that South Korea needs to consider doing. The first is that South Korea needs to closely observe and monitor U.S.-Russia negotiations, especially since shifts in international alliances right now and defense postures can significantly affect regional security dynamics. Another is that South Korea needs to strengthen alliances and partnerships, especially in terms of the U.S.-ROK alliance, and ensure that South Korea's security interests are being represented. And in line with this, South Korea needs to work on enhancing its trilateral cooperation with the United States and Japan, as it has been doing for the past few years. And this will ensure a unified stance on regional security issues, and it can potentially counterbalance shifts that arise from the U.S.-Russia negotiations. And in addition to all of this, South Korea needs to actively participate in multilateral forums, address the Ukraine conflict, and contribute to discussions on peace and stability, and show that it is a member of the liberal international order and that it's taking part in terms of contributing to the global peace and maintaining its diplomatic standing. So there are a lot of things that South Korea needs to do right now.
Right, so mostly it centers on strengthening alliance and keeping up with diplomatic efforts as well. So it faces critical decisions in navigating its diplomatic and security strategy moving forward. So we'll be closely monitoring these developments. But as of now, we'll have to wrap up our discussion right here. Many thanks to Professor Kim and Dr. Davis for your insights tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop ID, smartphone.